All right, so I'm going to try to sum up some of the information from the last two classes using the Eye on the Prize documentary. So I did want you to answer these questions for each case study, whether it was Emmett Till, Montgomery, and if we were in class, we would be going over these questions and making connections to the vicious cycle as well as the pyramid of hate, as we've been doing throughout the year. Just a quick recap, we've been looking at segregation laws, and some of them are a little odd, like burial laws for what state? Georgia. Amateur baseball. They're very specific with what you are allowed to do and not allowed to do, which is odd. And I would definitely point out some of those issues if we were in class. For example, intermarriage and cohabitation. We've been looking at this civil rights movement through the lens of federal tension with the local and state governments. And I think this is a perfect example here where you have the state of Florida intermarriage. So here they're saying that all marriages between a white person and a Negro of the fourth generation inclusive, when you get that specific, oof, that's just really, you really thought about it. So it's for hereby forever prohibited, which then tells us, because they passed this cohabitation law, that somebody figured out a loophole around this law. So now we would be looking at local and state. So the local and state passes a law that says intermarriage, and I guess the people in the state would want to challenge that. And they say, well, we're just going to live together. And so let's disregard the F for federal for this example. So the local state government passes this, and then people respond by saying, well, we're just going to live together, which then puts the local state governments in a position where they have to pass legislation that says cohabitation. Now you are not even allowed to live together. And so just keep thinking about that process as we go through the civil rights movement, that it's this constant struggle between the federal and the local states. It's about loopholes. And I would definitely continue to come back to those particular points. So the first case we look at that I wanted you to view the video was on the Emmett Till case. I did a search, 2018 Emmett Till. I'm sure if we did a Google search for this in the news, we would find some current stuff being written about Emmett Till. It definitely has its place in history. Why is Emmett Till significant? It's considered the start of the civil rights movement. I mean, this is the trigger right here. This is what really gets this thing going. And then also the years are important here, because in the 60s, we're always talking about college students, the ones that are leading the fight for civil rights. Well, let's just say I was 10 years old in 1955, and that image of Emmett Till really disturbed me. Let's say if I'm 10 and now it's 1965, I'm in my 20s, I'm in college. And so there's a definite connection there, and how young some of these kids were looking at that image and the impact that it did have, and how it influenced some of the people as they wind up getting older. Another example of cases not going the way of blacks in America, and I'll make a reference to that as well. So first thing I want you to do is, let's just say that you are a parent, and your kid, you're concerned about your kid's life, and do a quick role play. If we were in class, I would have you do this. As a parent, what do you say to your 10-year-old kid about why Emmett Till was brutally murdered? So pause the video and just try to figure out what you would say in your head. All right, let's move on. This is going back to that point here. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the OJ verdict here. This is a look back at the OJ verdict. And
all right, ladies and gentlemen, and the jury, I'm going to ask that you carefully listen to the verdicts as
this
they are being
video
read by
is
the
showing the
minds
reaction
of the bailiffs.
when it's determined that OJ,
Superior Court of California,
here we
County
go.
of Los Angeles, in the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA097211. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime. Penal Code Section 187.
I mean, I know it might seem odd. I mean, there were two people murdered However, there's so much celebration because it almost seems like for once the legal system plays out in favor of African Americans in this country. If you take the OJ trial and you put it in 1955 court cases, I would pretty much say that he might not even, OJ doesn't even make it to trial. They probably would have, pulled him out and served mob justice on that individual. A couple of other cases that African Americans question. Latasha Harlins, this is an interesting one right here, where a girl gets shot over orange juice. Susan Smith, this woman right here, she reports that she was carjacked by a black man, and then you later find out that none of it did take place, and she was the actual person responsible for what winds up happening to her kid in that particular story. So just again, like as these cases, Emmett Till, OJ, whenever there's a race case, it really seems to, you know, go back to that history in this country where so many of these cases seem to always go against, the African American. Just to make another connection here, this happened in Edison, New Jersey in 2014. For some reason, people were targeting people from India, Edison residents, and nobody could kind of figure out why. And then you come to find out that they were being targeted during Diwali, and it was pretty brutal. People were kicking open the doors and pistol whipping individuals. But in this image, I've selected it here. Um, just again, you have a group that is being targeted, and does the local community, do they have to protect the rights of these individuals? And here you see all of the residents here expressing their anger, trying to demand more from their local government. I just kind of threw that in there. So with the Emmett Till case, if you were struggling with the loophole, it was the all-white jury. The people reaction, in some cases there are none. The spark event was the murder of Emmett Till. And ordinary people, you look at Emmett Till's uncle who stands up in that courtroom and says, Darhe. I mean, right there, that's ordinary individuals, doing what he can. The federal government not really getting involved in the Emmett Till case. However, the image is definitely something that horrified, Americans, and really started to put people on one side of this whole segregation debate. All right, let's do a quick role play with Rosa Parks. So let's just say that you are the bus driver, and Rosa Parks is sitting in a seat right here, and you're driving the bus. What do you say? Let's pause it and just try to think about that. You're the bus driver. You are demanding that Rosa Parks moves. You're trying to comply with the law, or do you just want to drive this bus? So just take a second and try to role play that. What would you say to Rosa Parks if you were the driver? So pause it. Good luck. All right. I'm not sure what you did, but that definitely is an interesting scenario to role play in class to see what you would say. Keep in mind, some of these laws definitely are putting enforcement in the hands of ordinary individuals. Kind of like the what's going on during the coronavirus, where people are being asked to enforce some of the distancing rules and trying to keep people apart. You're leaving it up to some Family Dollar security guard or somebody who's a clerk to just enforce this ruling, and just not going to happen in some cases. Anyway, I want to also point out that there were other people who also challenged some of these laws. Claudette Colvin right here is another individual. This was before Rosa Parks. And I believe there's another one right here. Here we go. No, look at the year. This one, 1858. She refuses to give up her seat in the colored section of a trolley car in Philadelphia. Yeah, not the South, the North too. Keep that in mind. Anyway, let's move on here to the Little Rock Nine. So in the Little Rock Nine, you have 9 ordinary students that are trying to go to school. And just look at the anger on the local community right here. They just so angry about what's going on. in this particular case. There's another historic image. Alex Wilson's a reporter. He's trying to report on what's going on, and notice the mob justice on this particular reporter. If you were wondering why I would throw in something on the Korean War here, just keep in mind, if we go back to the local, state versus federal government, that if you watch the Eye on the Prize video series, the military was activated to walk these 9 students to class to protect their rights. Just imagine, like, maybe, a couple years prior, you were in Korea defending America from communism, and now you are being asked to march 9 students to class. Just kind of weird that the military would be used for that, but it really goes to show a lot of the tension in the federal government for once trying to use the troops to make sure that the rights of African Americans were being protected. There's another interesting point here. Keep in mind the integration of the schools just says integrate the schools. Well, how do you do that? Here they're talking about activities. If they're saying integrate the schools, does that mean you just go to your classes? What does that mean? You can participate in all activities, and that's what seems to be going on here. The principal is questioning whether or not Little Rock 9 is entitled to after-school activities and just functions. I guess they just want them to go to school. That's it. That's what we're doing with regard to integration. So Little Rock 9, Spark event, you have the 9 students trying to go to school. What's the local response? Well, they get angry and they get violent, which you see those particular images. What's the federal government action? They activate the troops, and the troops are sent to walk the students to class. And before you know it, when you get to the Ion Prize documentary, it does talk about how they just canceled school from the prior year. We didn't really address Montgomery with Rosa Parks here. So the federal government does declare the busing ruling unconstitutional. The Spark event would be Rosa Parks choosing, deciding not to give up her seat, and the local or state response. This one's interesting because you do start to see white and black participating together in a protest. And one of the things here that definitely is, the thing that works is the boycott. It's really putting people in a position like, are you willing to risk 60% of your riders because you're so committed to segregation of the races? If we were in class, I would be, going over these particular terms. What was the method used? Or was the person for or against segregation? What was ultimately their accomplishments? So if we look at, I know Rosa Parks should be on here somewhere. We look at SCLC right here. We have King. We have SNCC. Just be a way to kind of place so you have some understanding of some of the people involved. All right, so now we're going to move on here to Greensboro with the sit-ins. And, another role play activity. Here you have 4 African Americans, and you have to ask them to leave. What would you say? Would you just say, I'm going to need you to leave? What if they don't? What if they are resisting to move? What do you do in that particular situation? Do you call the authorities? So on a count of 3, what do you say? 1, 2, 3, go ahead. So again, that's just another way to kind of put you in that situation where you, just trying to get you to think about these laws here. And here you see Woolworth, which was a popular store going up into about the 80s, where there were lunch counters in these places. Also, look at this image here, where people were definitely targeted. Let's take a look at some of the video clips here that I've selected. We'll start with Emmett Till.
August 21st, 1955, 2 teenagers from Chicago boarded a train and traveled south to visit family in Mississippi.
We was going down there to pick some cotton because I know maybe 10 to 12, youngsters around there. That the girls was his girlfriend, So one of the local boys said, hey, there's a girl in that store there, so I bet you want to go in there and talk to her, So he went in there to.
Showed Till's corpse, beaten, mutilated, shot through the head. An entire generation of young black people would remember the horror of that photo. Roy Bryant, husband of the woman in the store, and J.W. Milam, her brother-in-law, were arrested for the murder of Emmett Till. The trial was held in nearby Sumner, Mississippi. Black organizations like the NAACP and the black press worked especially hard.
This is my son.
The defense argued that the body found tied to the cotton gin fan in the river was so disfigured that it could not be identified as Emmett Till. The trial took 5 long, hot days. The prosecution's star witness was Till's uncle, Mose Wright, who testified despite threats to his life.
He was called up on.
So again, the significance with the Emmett Till case is, the spark to the civil rights movement, how it's going to inspire, the next generation to not be passive and to try to really make changes. Let's say you look at the Montgomery.
In interstate buses like this one, and in city buses, the whites sat in the front, the blacks in back.
So right there you have the state law that's saying, hey, this is what you're going to have to follow, which violation of the 14th Amendment, which is federal legislation. So there seems to be something inconsistent there. Something is just not right with that particular piece of legislation. It conflicts with the federal. And so that's the point. You want to put people in position where, somebody's going to get arrested, but then we are going to be able to sue, take this case to the courts, and we're going to figure out if that law actually is in line with the Constitution, which is the whole point of the civil rights movement.
If more whites got on, the blacks had to give them the middle and back seats too. 3 months after the Till trial, Rosa Parks, a secretary for the NAACP, was arrested for refusing to give up her seat on a bus to a white passenger.
And when the policeman approached me, one of them spoke and asked me if the driver had asked me to.
That's why I wanted you to role play. The bus driver has to get the police officer, so he's the first line of defense. Okay, I have to go ahead and enforce this legislation. Just what a burden to be placed on this individual. And then, if somebody's not compliant, well, you're going to have to call in the authorities, and then they're going to have to remove this individual. She's going to be arrested. Yes, she is breaking the law, but then the real beef is with the courts. We're going to take this to the Supreme Court to see whether or not this is constitutional, your local or your state law.
Before the boycott, 2/3 of the bus riders were black. After December 5th, there were almost...
There you go, 2/3. So King, SCLC, and all of these civil rights demonstrators are not going to be successful if they do not have ordinary people doing extraordinary things.
A hilarious feeling that just goes all over you, that makes you feel that America is a great country and we're going to do more to make it greater.
Let's go to Little Rock 9 here.
By 1957, 3 years after the Supreme Court ruled that segregated schools were unconstitutional, most black children in the South were still forced to attend substandard schools. The Arkansas National Guard ringed the school with orders to admit only the white students.
So they're operating on the orders of the governor. The governor of the state is saying, we have to maintain the safety here, so we're not going to allow anybody, black into the school.
State troops were now being used to prevent enforcement of federal law. The first day, 8 of the 9 black...
Because she had that she could turn to as a friend, except that this woman came out of the crowd and guided her through the mob and onto the
Guard, leaving only a small force of city police to protect the Little Rock Nine as they entered Central High School.
Now they're about to get
inside of the
in.
building very, very fast.
We've just got a report here on this end that the
This
students
lady
are
is so angry. I always wonder, like, well, what does she do in the morning? She's reading a newspaper, she's getting her drink or her coffee, whatever it is, and she's like, wow, they're trying to integrate the school. I better get down there to Central High School and make sure that they don't get into that school. Like, you could be doing so many other things with your life, yet you chose to show up and protest, push over this barricade, and you seem to be dressed like, you got your earrings on, you're all dressed up, and here you are acting a fool because people just want to go to school.
That's right.
So it looks like mayhem. And so they're going to be able to say, we can't maintain order, at which point the federal government responds,
must be met, and with such measures as will preserve to the people as a whole their lawfully protected rights. Mob rule can not be allowed to override the decisions of our courts.
We are now an occupied territory. In the name of God, whom we all revere.
So now you have these federal troops that are making sure that these locals don't act a fool and get out of hand. Why? Because you have incidents like this.
The civil rights picture of
that
those
take
years
place.
was one of violence.
Let's take a look at
of
this.
segregation.
Alex Wilson.
The names in the news
right
were
here.
names like Little Rock,
American
Clinton,
journalist.
Tennessee. Somewhere outside the picture was Dr. King, speaking, traveling, but seldom making news as a leader.
Now, you remember some of those images. I'm going to switch to this documentary. This from the LA riots in the 90s. And here you have yet another reporter
that may delay a suspect's awareness of your presence.
This documentary is titled Hip Hop in the LA Riots, so they do use rap music. But again, like this reporter, now it's on the opposite side. Let's see what happens.
And as I put it in drive and started to pull out, a big rock came through the side window and broke all the glass and hit me in the head.
Nah, he's a newsman. Yeah, they fired on him.
And I couldn't believe the rage. I'd never seen such a built-up rage in the community.
Final approach to danger, death, destruction around every corner. Another dead body and you wanna keep running. So you might as well kiss your ass goodbye, 'cause in the long run,
we all die.
It was chaos. People were screaming and hollering.
Let's go back to the documentary, or to the last slide here. So here's kind of the closure slide. Some of the people they talked about: Emmett Till, Linda Brown, Rosa Parks, people doing some extraordinary things. Some of the groups that are starting to emerge: SCLC, Southern Christian Leadership Conference, it broke off there, Congress on Racial Equality. Keep in mind, we did talk about the Tale of Two 60s and Remove Their Money, which is simply the role of the boycott. So right now we're in the early 60s. We'll see where this all ends up next class when we continue watching the documentary. And that's it for this session.